I was halfway under the cargo bay door, elbow deep in strip bolts and bad decisions, when I heard her voice behind me. You know the kind of voice that makes you think trouble's about to happen? Yeah, that one. I didn't even have to look to know it was Svara. Silver fur, eyes like polished amber, and that smug little half-smile that said she already knew what I was about to say before I said it. I kept talking just to keep from thinking too hard about how close she was standing. If I can just get this damn panel locked down tight, was as far as I got before something warm, soft, and way too alive wrapped around my calf. I froze. It was her tail. Plush, thick, and with just enough weight to make it feel like I'd been tethered to a furry anchor. I twisted around and gave her my best what the hell look. If this is some kind of fuzzy handshake, I'm all for it, but maybe give a guy some warning? She tilted her head like I just asked her to explain gravity. Then we are bound, she said. Just like that. Like it was the most normal sentence in the universe. The moon's our witness. I laughed, because what else do you do when a beautiful alien tells you something that makes zero sense? Bound? To what? She blinked slowly. To me, of course. You accepted my tale. You cannot refuse without public trial. That got a real good laugh out of me, right up until I saw the way she was looking at me. Dead serious. Not a prank. Not a joke. She went on to explain that in Vulpine culture, wrapping your tail around someone mid-sentence was the equivalent of a public marriage proposal. A claim. And if the other person didn't immediately shove you away, it meant acceptance. Apparently, the clock was already ticking. I was hers now. Just like that. I told her I wasn't ready for commitment, which only made her ears twitch in what I think was amusement. You play hard to get. Very traditional. I like that. I said I wasn't playing anything, but she'd already started tugging me toward the corridor, tail still snug around my leg. And here's the thing, they don't just let go when they want. That tail was holding on with the same stubbornness I usually reserve for rusted bolts. Halfway to my workshop, a merchant walking past took one look at us, gasped, and sprinted away. By the time I got to the next deck, I could feel eyes on us from every direction. Vulpine, humans, even a few of the tentacle folk from C-Block. All staring like they just witnessed a crime or a miracle. I asked her to let go before people started talking. She said, "Let them talk. It is good they see you." Which, by the way, is exactly the sort of phrase that guarantees people will talk. One of the engineers leaned over a railing as we passed and called down, "Congrats, Tanner! Didn't think you had it in you." Another one yelled, "She's way out of your league, man." Svar beamed like they just announced our engagement over the comms. I tried to take a sharp turn to lose her, but forgot that meant dragging her sideways with me. She didn't stumble. She just followed like it was the most natural thing in the world. That tail was still wrapped tight, and every time I moved I felt it flex, like she was making sure I didn't wriggle free. At one point I bent down to grab a drop spanner, and her tail squeezed just enough to make me freeze again. "That's affectionate," I muttered. "It is anchoring," she corrected. "You wander. I keep you." We got back to my workspace and I tried one last time to explain that humans don't do the whole tail claim thing. She nodded politely and said, "Of course. Your species is shy. We will adjust pace." Which apparently meant she was still keeping the tail exactly where it was, only now she was leaning casually against my workbench like we'd been dating for years. I went back to my repairs, trying not to think about how soft that tail was or the way her fur brushed against my jumpsuit when she shifted. She started asking questions, personal questions. Favorite meals. Preferred sleeping arrangements. Whether I liked to be wrapped at night. I told her I was more of a blanket guy. She said, "Good. I will be your blanket." At some point, I realized she wasn't letting go until, well, I didn't actually know when. I asked her straight out, "How long is this thing supposed to last?" She said, "The bonding period is short. Just 3 station cycles." I asked how long that was in hours. She said, 87. I laughed again, because apparently she thought being attached for nearly 4 days straight was short. We got interrupted when one of the cargo loaders stopped by with a delivery, took one look at us, and whispered, "You lucky bastard," before walking out like he just witnessed history. Svara watched him leave and said, "You have status now. Others will respect you." Which is great, except I hadn't actually agreed to earn that status. By the end of the shift, I'd stopped trying to explain and started negotiating. "Okay, how about this? Tail around the chair instead of me." She shook her head. "The chair is not my mate." "Fine then, maybe just one leg?" She narrowed her eyes. "Do you wish me to think you will run away?" I sighed. "I know I'll run away if you give me the chance." She smiled like that was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. As I packed up my tools, I realized something. This wasn't a misunderstanding I could clear up in one conversation. This was a full-blown cultural train wreck, and I was tied to the tracks with the fluffiest rope in the galaxy. By the time I woke up the next morning, the station was already buzzing. I don't mean the usual background hum of life support systems. I mean the kind of buzz you get when word spreads faster than the air scrubbers. Apparently, one innocent tail wrap had turned into a full-blown space opera overnight. According to the rumor mill, I'd either married into Vulpine royalty, agreed to duel for her honor, or been caught stealing her pheromone signature in a highly intimate exchange. I hadn't even had breakfast yet, and I was already infamous. Walking down the main corridor felt like crossing a parade route. People nodded at me in that way you nod when you're not sure whether to congratulate someone or warn them. A pair of off-duty pilots passed by, one elbowing the other and whispering, "That's him. The one she claimed." The other just smirked like he knew exactly what that meant. Svara, of course, took it as a sign of approval and waved to everyone like we were on a wedding float. When I tried to steer her toward the maintenance deck, she insisted we had important cultural steps to complete. Before I could argue, she guided me into a small Vulpine-run eatery where the smell alone made my human stomach tighten in self-defense. She ordered something that looked like a plate of raw, bioluminescent fish guts. When I said I wasn't sure I could eat it, she leaned in, ears angled forward, and said, "If you cannot share my meal, how can you share my nest?" I nearly choked on air. She fed me a slice herself, her tail giving an approving squeeze when I didn't spit it out. Apparently, that was a test, and apparently I'd passed. After lunch, she decided it was time to teach me the basics of her people's bonding rituals. These included something she called the spiral dance, which in practice meant locking eyes with her while moving in tight circles so our limbs, and in her case, tail, brushed constantly. My brain was stuck between thinking I was making a complete fool of myself and wondering if this counted as exercise. Passers-by stopped to watch. One guy clapped. Another muttered, "Lucky bastard," under his breath. I wanted to tell them I was being held hostage by a ball of fur and charm, but my captor kept smiling and spinning me until I was dizzy. Word of our progress traveled fast, and not everyone was happy about it. A group of cargo haulers warned me at the loading dock that claiming a Vulpine came with obligations. One leaned in and whispered, "You know they expect a certain performance, right? Nightly." I nearly dropped my wrench. Svara overheard and said without missing a beat, "Yes. He will meet expectations." I was pretty sure my face went the color of emergency lights. It wasn't just gossip. My daily life started changing. Other Vulpani began nodding respectfully when I passed, like I'd somehow joined their inner circle. Station shopkeepers offered me bonding discounts, and insisted I take better cuts of meat for her health. Even the station AI updated my profile to include Vulpani partner in my housing preferences. Svara was delighted. I was starting to feel like I'd been drafted into a club I didn't apply for. And then there were the comments. Oh, the comments. She had no filter, and I'm not sure she even understood why her words hit the way they did. We were in the machine shop when she said, completely seriously, "I like the way your hands work. Strong but gentle. Good for wrapping around me." I dropped the spanner and pretended I'd heard wrong. Later, while helping me haul a generator, she murmured, "You move well under strain. I will enjoy testing that." My coworkers pretended to be busy, but I saw the grins. She also seemed to think that any refusal on my part was a challenge to overcome. When I told her I needed space to focus on a repair job, she interpreted it as, "Prove your worth in my domain," and proceeded to hand me tools faster than I could use them, tail still firmly anchored to my leg. I think she was keeping track of my heartbeat through it, because every time I got flustered, her ears twitched like she'd just won a point. The strangest part was that she never once acted possessive in a mean way. She wasn't controlling so much as relentless. Always smiling, always finding ways to close the gap between us, physically and culturally. If I stepped away, the tail would reel me back in. If I kept my mouth shut, she'd fill the silence with stories about her family's proud lineage, each one involving increasingly absurd feats, like her uncle outrunning a shuttle on foot or her cousin seducing 3 planetary governors in a single week. She told these stories with the same energy someone else might use to explain how to make coffee. One evening, while I was tightening a series of bolts overhead, she suddenly asked, "Do you prefer being on top or underneath?" I froze so hard I almost dropped the wrench on my face. She clarified, "For sleeping. My nest is layered. I can put you above me, or I can curl over you." I mumbled something about not being much of a nest person, but she just nodded thoughtfully and said, "We will try both." By the end of the second day, I realized my protests weren't slowing anything down. If anything, they were giving her more material to work with. She seemed to take joy in my awkwardness, like it was part of the dance. And maybe in her eyes it was. For her, every blush, every stammer, every awkward attempt to dodge a question was proof that I was invested in the bond. I was trapped in a loop where the only way to convince her I wasn't interested was to stop acting like myself, and the only way to stop acting like myself was to not be me. Which was, of course, impossible. Somewhere between the gossip, the rituals, and the raw alien fish, I caught myself thinking, maybe this isn't so bad. The thought scared me more than the tail around my leg. Because if I started getting used to it, I wasn't sure I'd ever want her to let go. It all came to a head when a tall, broad-shouldered Vulpine with fur like burnished copper stepped in front of us in the main concourse. He had the kind of expression you get when you're about to deliver bad news and enjoy it. "So," he said, looking me over like I was a questionable tool he wasn't sure would hold up. "This is the human who thinks he can claim Svara." I started to correct him, but she stepped forward and announced proudly, "Yes. This is Eli. He is mine." My mouth was halfway open to protest when he bared his teeth in what I assumed was a smile but felt a lot like a threat. "Then let him prove it." Apparently, I'd just been volunteered for something called the courtship trials. From the way people started gathering around, it was clear this wasn't just a private matter. The trials had 3 parts: strength of body, strength of will, and strength of tail. That last one had me worried for obvious reasons. Still, walking away now would mean losing whatever respect I'd accidentally gained and probably offending half the Vulpani on the station. The first trial was strength of body. They rolled out a massive bar of some dense alien alloy, the kind of thing you'd need a powered exosuit to move. Svara's cousin, or rival suitor, I still wasn't sure, lifted it like it was made of foam. When they gestured to me, I knew I wasn't moving it without help. So I smiled, walked over to the nearest cargo lift, rolled it into place, and slid the bar on top. The lift groaned but managed. I raised it slowly, locked eyes with the crowd, and said, "Humans use tools. That's our strength." A few Vulpani laughed. A few more nodded. Svara's ears perked in what I think was approval. The second trial was strength of will. This one involved a picture of something that looked like liquid copper and smelled like burnt cinnamon and jet fuel. My opponent took one sip, shuddered, and set it down. I knew I couldn't match Vulpani physiology for raw tolerance, but I had grown up on Earth with relatives who made illegal moonshine that could strip paint. I downed the whole thing in 3 swallows, slammed the cup on the table, and said, Tastes like breakfast. The crowd roared. My stomach, on the other hand, was already negotiating its surrender. Then came the third trial, strength of tail. They cleared a space, and my opponent's tail flexed like a living whip, knocking over a stack of crates to show off. I had nothing to compete with, until I remembered the mop in my workshop. I ran to grab it, duct taped it to my belt, and marched back in like I just strapped on a sword. The crowd went silent. I started spinning my hips in wide circles, the mop swaying wildly. At first there were snickers, then full-blown laughter. I kept going, adding ridiculous flourishes, dipping low, even twirling around Svara so the mop brushed her shoulder like some kind of dance move. By the end, the laughter had turned into applause. Someone shouted, "The human's tail has spirit!" and the place erupted. Svara's rival looked like he'd bitten into something sour. He stalked off without another word, and just like that, I'd apparently won the trials. Svara stepped close, her tail tightening around my leg again, warm and sure. "You have proven yourself," she said, voice low enough for just me to hear. "You are worthy of my bond." I muttered, glad the mop passed inspection, which made her ears twitch in amusement. Winning the trials had an immediate side effect I hadn't anticipated. My status on the station went from guy with the weird alien neighbor to officially bonded partner of a high-ranking Vulpine. Shopkeepers now refused to take my credits, offering goods as tribute. People I'd barely spoken to before suddenly wanted to sit with me in the mess hall, asking for advice on winning over Vulpine women. I told them I didn't have advice so much as a growing list of things not to do, but that didn't stop them. Of course, Svara took my victory as a sign that I was now fully committed. She started planning things. "We will need a larger nest," she said one night, tail idly brushing my ankle while she looked over a data pad of potential quarters. "Something with more warmth regulation. And space for two." I told her I was fine where I was. She gave me a look that said my opinion was adorable but irrelevant. She also doubled down on the verbal ambushes. While inspecting a plasma conduit with me, she casually said, "You handle the long, hard tools with skill. That pleases me." I nearly dropped the wrench into the conduit. Another time, while helping me push a heavy crate, she murmured, "You have good thrust. Steady. Controlled." I could feel my ears burning while the cargo handlers pretended not to listen. I tried to talk to her about boundaries, about maybe easing off before people started assuming even more. She listened patiently, then said, "You passed the trials. There is no easing off. We only grow closer." I said I wasn't ready for all this, and she replied, "Then I will carry you until you are." Which, judging by the look in her eyes, was not a metaphor. Still, I couldn't deny the weird satisfaction that came with having survived the trials, on my terms. I hadn't outmuscled anyone or outranked them through raw biology. I'd just been human about it. Found a way around the problem. Turned the rules sideways. Maybe that's why she liked me. Or maybe it was just a mop trick. Either way, she wasn't letting go. And I was starting to wonder if I even wanted her to. By the time the second week rolled in, the station felt smaller than ever, like every corridor was a hallway in the same shared apartment. I couldn't so much as grab a coffee without catching sight of that russet tail flicking lazily as if it had nothing better to do than remind me it existed. The gossip hadn't died down, it had mutated. Now, apparently, I was stalling, the wedding for dramatic effect, because in Vulpine romance lore, dragging things up meant you were preparing a grander gesture. I wasn't preparing anything except maybe my exit strategy. Not that it was going well. Her people had a knack for, accidentally, being in your way when you tried to book a shuttle. She was everywhere. In the mechanics bay, asking, innocent, questions about human torque wrenches, which she held like a dainty fork. In the mess hall, sliding into my booth uninvited, ordering 2 spoons with the dessert. And in the gym, demonstrating tail stretches that conveniently required her wrapping it around me to test resistance. Every time I tried to explain my position, she'd tilt her head with that sly grin and say something like, You humans have such charming ways of begging for patience. My colleagues started calling me groom-to-be. Overcomes. I considered faking a broken leg just to get some medship time away from her. Then came the family dinner. Her clan had docked for a trading run, and they insisted I join them. 8 Vulpine, all with tails, all wrapping them around my chair legs under the table as a sort of territorial show. I nearly bolted when her aunt asked, "So how many kids do you think you can manage in your first cycle?" It was a legitimate question in their culture. In mine, it was enough to choke on the fermented berry wine. I tried to mumble something about career goals and slow timelines, but her father simply laughed, slapped my back hard enough to nearly dislodge my lungs, and declared, "He's shy. Good breeding stock." I didn't think it could get more surreal until the station AI, clearly in on the joke, sent me an automated "Congratulations on your engagement" message. It had even adjusted my profile to pending partnership, which triggered a flood of coupons for couples massages and discounted fertility supplements. My attempts to delete the status were mysteriously overridden. I suspected her tail was not the only thing she had wrapped tightly around my life. The breaking point came during a repair job in 0G. She happened to be floating nearby, tail drifting toward me like a curious serpent. This time, instead of pulling away, I let it coil around my leg, locked eyes with her, and asked, "Is this really what you want?" Her ears twitched, and in a rare moment of sincerity she admitted, "You're different. I like how you fight." There was no double entendre that time, just the truth. And damn it, I realized maybe I wasn't fighting to escape anymore. Maybe I was just fighting the fact that, against all logic, I was starting to enjoy it.